Hello and welcome to 8th episode of Mysteries, Graveyards, and the Human Psyche. This one is very special because it's part 2 of The Light and Darkness of Yule. Last week we talked more about the stereotypically dark side of Yule with Krampus. And this week we are talking about the stereotypically light side of Yule with Sinterklaas, and the Sinterklaas festival in particular, which happens in Rhinebeck, New York, and Kingston usually as well before the pandemic times. And because of the pandemic, they had to kind of scale back a little bit. Just for the interest of public health and safety. But Sinterklaas is something that is very, very special. It is a parade, a pageant, a community ritual. It's living theater, and it's a liminal space. It's an in-between space. A parade is something that doesn't happen every day, and that's why it's special to us. But the parade is also something that brings us in contact with our modern folklore, our modern myths. In my tarot classes, when I talk about the history of the trionfi, which were these grand parades in the tradition of the conquering Roman emperors, they had these recognizable characters like Time, Father Time, Day and Night, immortality, fame. These days our characters are a little bit less abstract than that, and we have parades such as the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, where we see giant floats of recognizable characters like Snoopy or Garfield, or Bart Simpson was for many, many years one of those popular characters in the parade. And when we see them, we know who they're referencing. Sinterklaas is showing us our recognizable figure of Santa, but it's Santa not in the way that he is depicted in a lot of pop culture and movies and things like that. Sinterklaas is really in the tradition of Saint Nicholas. And Saint Nicholas was a very fascinating real person. There's a lot of lore about him. One of the things that I've heard is that the reason why we have balls on the Christmas tree is because Saint Nicholas found out who the young women in the community were that were in danger of being kicked out of their house because they were not able to be married off to somebody, and he would put some money for them in these little balls and leave them on the door for them or nearby the door for them. And Sinterklaas is also somebody who is, tied into the Dutch tradition of the winter solstice festival. But there's this really interesting idea about Sinterklaas being someone who is the spirit of goodness, or the spirit of light, or the spirit of love itself. Because as you'll hear from our lovely interview with Jeanne Fleming, that Sinterklaas is really somebody who is something that is, I guess you could say, beyond religion or beyond history. And I think you'll really find this one of the most fascinating episodes that we've had so far. Also because it contains the spirit of community, and how important it is for Rhinebeck during the time of the pandemic to get together again as a community and to be able to do this. And without further ado, I present to you Sinterklaas.
This is a show about authentic, deep connection to the in-between spaces. Join me and my guests as we explore the boundaries between heaven and earth, between the living and the dead, between night and day. Welcome to Mysteries, Graveyards, and the Human Psyche. I'm your host, Melissa B. On this week's episode,
so it's just keeping that, I think it's just keeping that first flame alive,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You light the fire and you see who comes to dance.
Welcome back to my mini-series on the light and darkness of Yule. Today we will be exploring the light of Yule. And standing in the light and bringing the light to us is Jeanne Fleming. Jeanne Fleming is an artistic visionary and the creator of Sinterklaas in Rhinebeck. And she has been doing this for over 30 years. The event is very popular for the community itself and brings people from miles around, coming from New Jersey and New York State, and I'm sure even further afield. Although it's called Sinterklaas, it's really non-denominational, and one of the things that really stands out is that every year there is an honored animal. When I went to Sinterklaas in 2019, the honored animal was the sturgeon, considered the dinosaur of the Hudson. But this year is very special because there are two honored animals. We have the frog and the mouse.
Well, it's funny, because the thing about Sinterklaas is that the way you can get to the spiritual in Sinterklaas is through the creatures. You can't talk about it, in other ways, because you get into trouble in all kinds of different kinds of ways, from schools and churches and things like that, if you hit it directly. But if you work through the creatures and you talk about all of their qualities, you can talk about spirit in a way that people don't get upset. It's kind of interesting. So that's how actually the most important parts of Sinterklaas get expressed, is through these creatures that become the honored animals. And this year, I'm talking about the frog as the healer, but also it was the mice that the vaccines, and many vaccines, over the years were developed on. And so I've really been talking about that a lot, about how these are creatures that are very important right now for our time, because they play that role which we need. We need those vaccines, and we need healers right now. So it's been a really wonderful way to talk about healing the community and things like that. So
beautiful. So tell us, if you will, how did Sinterklaas get started?
I was actually doing the Statue of Liberty celebration for New York City at the time when Sinterklaas got created, because I live in this small community, and this community was well known for a craft fair that happened here. The most prestigious craft fair in America happened in this little town. And they left. They went to another place. They needed a bigger space. And a local jeweler came to me and he said, would you create something for the town? Because people are going to forget who we are. And would you make something for us that would keep us alive as a community? So what I did in those days, when I would work in communities, I would throw these things that I called charrettes, like an architectural charrette. I gather 100 people together, children, old people, families, merchants, business, all the churches, and serve a big meal. And then I put up 3 giant pieces of paper. And everybody could give their ideas of what they wanted. What is it you would like this community to have? And there were lots and lots of ideas. And at the end of the night, everyone got to vote. You could vote as many times as you wanted. And the 3 things were, when do you want something? Who is it for? And what's it about? And at the end of the night, the vote said they wanted something at the holiday season for children having to do with the Dutch heritage of the town. Well, I had never heard of Sinterklaas. So I took this information and I went out and I started to research. And literally on the very first day, I found Sinterklaas. And it was perfect right from the beginning, and not perfect because it couldn't be done the way that it had traditionally been done because there were a lot of issues around it. And also too, one of the things I really wanted to get away from is I can't stand that Christmas is all about having and wanting, that all kids think about is, I want this, I want that. I wanted to change that energy for this non-denominational. It was also non-denominational, which was really important. So, because I had to have something that everybody could get behind, and everybody could get behind the children. And this figure is Sinterklaas. He's a wonderful fellow because what he did was in the Inquisition times, he saved the lives of children who were Jewish, who were from Africa. He took in all the children, and Dutch society was like that. They were traders. They appreciated that there were people all over this planet who had things to offer that were worthwhile. So they didn't have the same prejudices in terms of ethnic identity that other cultures had. So this figure of Sinterklaas became this guy, an actual bishop who took in all these children. So it was that was perfect. But there were things that weren't perfect about it. Like, for example, children at this time of year are judged, they're punished. So I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to
punished. You said
yes, in fact,
with like getting coal in their stockings.
Coal in their stocking, or in this tradition, children ran the gauntlet. They actually ran through adults on either side, the bad children, and they had switches, and they would beat them. And I thought, okay, we're going to change all this. Because what is this season really about? It's about renewal, right? The Christ child, that's a baby. Why is it a baby? It's a baby because it's new life. It's hope that in the spring, that the sun will come back again. It's all part of all those rituals, those magical rituals that made winter go away and made us able to survive winter and have the spring come. So I thought, what we're going to do is we're going to turn those switches into their royal scepters, and we're going to make the children the kings and queens of the day. So that, I thought about that, and that plays into, every kid gets a trophy these days and that kind of nonsense. And I didn't want that either. I didn't want to just honor the children. I wanted to teach them that with being honored and recognized in this way, it comes with responsibility. That when you are honored, you have to be responsible. And so one of the things we did was I had them tie 3 wishes in their branches. So the scepters became branches, and then the kids were wearing these crowns, kings and queens. But in every branch, they had to tie 3 wishes, one for their family, one for their community, and one for the world. So that the focus was not on them, but on what they wanted for the world and what they would do to make the world a better place. Their family, and that has been one of the more fascinating things as this has developed over the years, because children, amazingly enough, one of the hardest jobs of the day are the wish ladies, because children don't know how to make wishes for anything other than for themselves. And it's been extremely hard teaching them, no, it isn't about wanting that Nintendo or that whatever. It's about, what do you want for your family? And the wish ladies spend time with the children. After they make their crown and their branch, they go to the wish lady. And the wish ladies, on an individual basis, work with the children to figure out what are these wishes. Now, there's been a change recently where it's been easier for kids to wish for people to pay attention to climate change, global warming. They have a sense that there's something about the planet that they need to be responsible for. But what's really been astonishing for the people who do this, and it's very evocative for them, is kids wishing that their parents would stop fighting, kids wishing that their family had more money and that they could get better food. But it takes a while to draw those things out to the children. And that's what the role of the wish ladies is to really have the children focus on what is it that they need to do for their family. What does their family need? What does their community need? And so that's been a big part of Sinterklaas from the beginning. And then there's a ceremony. So one of the other things when I started it again, because I started this like 38 or 39 years ago, and I did it for a very long time, and then I stopped doing it for about 8 or 9 years, and then they begged me to bring it back. So now we're in our like 14th year of bringing it back. So we've actually done this maybe 24 or 25 times over all these years. One of the things that was really important to me was that the community had changed after 9/11. The community was no longer just old Rhinebeck conservative. It was filled with people who were Jewish, with people who had moved up from the city after 9/11. It was very important to me that the Jewish community be involved in this. Also that the merchants approved it, because this is a major Saturday for them to make money that they have to give up, because people are not necessarily going into the stores. They're in the restaurants, but they're not in the stores because the focus is other places. And so when I worked with the Jewish community, one of the rabbis, who was the one who got all signs of Christmas out of all the schools, even the mitten tree, she had gotten it out. She said to me, I just wish there was a symbol that we could all get behind that wasn't loaded, that we could all get behind. And that night I went home and I had a dream, and I dreamed of the stars. And the idea behind the stars is that not the children, but the adults have the stars. They buy the stars. It helps to fund the event. Now, a few dollars of every star goes to help with food insecurities in the community. It's matched by a grant. So we raise about $25,000, $30,000 that we give to families to buy food at the holiday time. So that's also been a part since the beginning, but now it's really there. During COVID, it was extremely important. But anyway, so the star, what happens is the parents buy the stars, they come, they join the parade at the end, and there's a moment where we start it by honoring the kings and queens. And so all the adults have to go down on one knee, which they do, which is shocking. Everyone was like, nobody will ever do it. But in fact, everybody does it. They go down on one knee and they hold the stars at the children's waist level. So the children suddenly are the tallest in the community. They're the kings, they're the queens, they have on their crowns, but they're bigger than everybody else. And they look out on this sea of stars, and the adults cheer them. They hip, hip, hooray, for the kids. And then we say, now stand up and hold the stars over your head. And suddenly the whole community is at one under this canopy of beautiful stars lit up. It's so beautiful. It's just, it blows my mind every time I see it. And so that's the moment when the ritual is complete, when everyone stands and the whole community is under these stars. And I'm hoping this year everybody will have these, ribbons hanging off their wrists. So that'll give it a kind of color too, that will be different. But so that's how it kind of all developed in this incarnation. And that, so that's what we're doing. So the whole community is really enacting a community ritual. The children have had to make things. It's not made by me. Everybody makes it themselves. It's in their own hands. And then the adults, when they do this, they're then also taking responsibility into their own hands for honoring the children. It's physical, it isn't just an idea. It's something that they actually physically do. And so, so that to me is what this is all about. And so anyway, I found Sinterklaas. It was great. It was a perfect little, idea to play with, but I really changed it so that it would work for us in our time and for our community. It isn't about just like cultural appropriation in that sense. It's really about, okay, what's our deep heritage and how can we learn from that? What can we do better? What have we learned all these years? So one of the things was there's a figure in Sinterklaas called the Black Peter, which is, there are people in blackface. And in Holland, this is hugely controversial. So when I was presenting in a public meeting that we were going to do this festival, and this is what it was about, now, in the old days, I had to call it Old Dutch Christmas in Rhinebeck because they said nobody will know what that foreign word is. But in the many, many years, 25 years, right, since I started it, lots of people had moved into town who were different. Not only that, the internet came into being. So someone Googled Sinterklaas and they found the Black Peters and all of the controversy about them. And she stood up in the meeting and she said, people are going to think we're racist. And it was one of those amazing moments when I don't know what came over me, but suddenly I said, okay. I said, you're right. So here's the idea. I said, we will give up the historical accuracy of the Black Peters, and which we could have used as a teaching tool. If every man in this room over 50 agrees to be a Grumpus. And so the Grumpus is based a little bit on the Krampus character, who's the guy who accompanies. I mean, he's an ancient figure. He's the wild man. He's the man from the woods. Sinterklaas is from the urban environment. They come together. So I said, every man in this room over 50 has to be a Grumpus. And it was fabulous. It was just like pandemonium broke out. And everybody was yelling, like, yeah, you should be Grumpuses. You should. And I was making up the character right there in a moment. And they all started to say they would. And then finally, the last one, the most grouchy man on the village council, he said, well, okay, I'll do it, but I'll only do it if Warren does it with me. And Warren said, well, I'll only do it if Ben does it with me. And the next thing I knew, I had the whole village board agreeing to be Grumpuses. And then we had to create the characters, which we did. We made these costumes for them. And these guys, I got a choreographer. She taught them how to do a dance. They all went to the rehearsals. And out they came in these crazy outfits and they give away candy. And now what's happened is we have a waiting list to be a Grumpus. Some of the Grumpuses have aged out. But each Grumpus has developed their own character. And they just started their rehearsals the other night. And one of them pretends to give kids candy and then he pulls it back. And then he gives it to them. Another one acts like he's he falls down on the ground. The child like has to help him up. And they've all come up with these crazy ideas. One's the grumpy grumpus who refuses to do the dance and sits down on a chair. And they made this all up themselves. It's incredible. So one of the biggest moments of the day is when the grumpuses come out and do their dance. Everybody comes to watch them do this stupid dance. They go, hoo, 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 like this. They don't know how to dance. They're horrible. Everyone comes out to see them. And then the women in the community got upset that there were grumpuses but no women, so they created the Wild Women. So there's a whole group of women from a jazzercise class who created the Wild Women, and they've made their own costumes, and they dance like real dancers to something, music and they're choreographed, they're in the parade. But in the afternoon, another thing happens now where this group of women who do contra dancing and everything, they form their own group of women. And one of the greatest moments in the afternoon is when these women, uptown, low-down dancers, confront the grumpuses. And they do a dance, like a really kind of great little dance in their outfits. And the grumpuses imitate them. And it's one of the funniest things. And it just happened. Nobody planned it. So that's part of the thing too, which is that the community really owns the event. So they make up their own stuff. So I never know what's going to happen. It's like, I never imagined that this group of dancers would suddenly confront the grumpuses on the street and this thing would happen. And so stuff like that happens all the time. And then there's all the encounters during the day, like this year with everyone tying ribbons on each other's wrists, that's going to create all kinds of interesting encounters that I will probably never hear about, but which will be fascinating for people, right? You go up to someone you don't know and say, I want to bring you into my community. Let me tie this on you. It's a connection that happens that, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But so I really believe, for me, what really matters is that the people who are non-artists, we make the parade, we make all these puppets, and it's beautiful and wonderful. But for me, the real essence of this is that people who aren't artists get to make something, and for a period of time they get to experience what that is, that feeling, where you forget time, you forget yourself, and you're just involved with these jewels and these ribbons and this branch. And I really believe that if every person could experience what that is, that it kind of changes the shape of your soul, and that probably is our best chance for there being like peace in the world and people being able to come together, because it's a lot about just forgetting who you are and getting caught in that creative moment that allows your heart to expand. And I believe that, can change the world. So that's why I guess I do what I do, is to try to create moments where that can happen for people who aren't necessarily artists. And happen in community, so that it's beyond just the self too. You're making something. When you make your crown and your branch, now you're in a group of people who you don't know maybe necessarily, or who you know better. And all day people are saying, like, oh, what a beautiful crown. Oh, what a lovely branch. Oh, what's that? It's that. And then the wish ladies, they write down all the wishes in a book.
Who are the wish ladies? Are they chosen, or do they elect themselves? Who are these wish ladies?
So the people who are wish ladies are people who have really big hearts. They're therapists. They're all different kinds of people, though. And the other thing that's really interesting in this group of people, so now we've been doing this for 14 years together. So if you were 60, you're now 74. If you were 65, you're now 79, right? So that's a reality. So they're all professional women who are now retired, who have the time and the interest to do something for their community.
The parade itself, the pageantry itself, it defies death. It looks death in the face and says, well, we're still alive.
Yeah.
You know, how much life, look how much life we have inside of ourselves. And also, we're not scared. We're not scared because if we all can stand up together to create this theater, which is, it's ancient and it's also so modern, that it's interesting that it does draw from these ancient roots. But
Definitely.
I think one of the beautiful things of potential that America has is that we can pull all of these old things together and we can make them new.
They can make them new. And that, you know, I've been thinking a lot, we're, you know, this notion of cultural appropriation, I've been thinking about it recently. And that's what we do as humans. We pull together, like you say, threads, and we make them new all the time. It isn't about appropriating something. People come up with the same ideas all over the world because this is what we need as humans. Right. And if you feel, and that's what you feel, you're pulling those threads through from, I remember years ago, I was in the Halloween parade, and which I lead the parade in the sense of I have to pace it for television. I've got all these weird jobs I have to do. But there is a moment where I turn around, I get to about 10th Street, which is right before television. And I, for the first time in a way, turn around and look down the avenue at the parade. And this was before 9/11. And I remember turning around and looking down the avenue, seeing the World Trade Center, you know, rising up at the end of the street, and realizing that, oh my God, that this is the first circle. That I'm doing nothing different than calling up the spirits around the very first circle, around the fire, you know, to make that magic, to hope that, you know, because Halloween is one of those moments when you realize winter's coming and you have to have your last moment of life in a way before everyone closes in. And I just remember looking at it and thinking, oh my God, I'm in the first circle. It's just the circle's a lot bigger now. But I really understood that. And that's what's going on. It isn't, it's about realizing that deep human need to have these things happen at certain seasons, at certain, you know, times of the year. And so I've always done, you know, rituals and celebrations around the solstice and all of that, and many other things. I mean, I've been doing this it's now like, I guess I've been running Halloween for 40 years. So I've been doing this for maybe 45, almost 50 years, making up these stories. And sure, they're based on ancient stories, and then they change, and then you get them started, and then they change themselves because that's what people need. That's what they need to be, you know? So it's just keeping that, I think it's just keeping that first flame alive, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You light the fire and you see who comes to dance.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Lighting the fire. Mm-hmm. Whether you light it with a thing that you pull now and it makes the fire, or you rub sticks together. It's just starting the fire.
Yeah. And thank you for keeping the channels open for all of these beautiful things to come to pass, because people need them now more than ever. People need this.
I hope so.
Thank you so much, Jeanne, for sharing the story of Sinterklaas and for sharing your time with me and my listeners.